If I lost everything and had to rebuild my portfolio from scratch, this is exactly how I'd get started. I'm gonna teach you how to make $2,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 in real estate the old-fashioned way without BS. I attribute every single dollar in my net worth to this single most important strategy of 2024. Sorry, usually I have my editor take all the spicy bits of my video and splice them together and put them in the intro to build intrigue. So you're like, ooh, that video is going to be cool. What's it going to be about? But we're trying this whole one take thing, so I had to get creative. So let's jump into today's video where we're going to be talking about how having a roommate can actually explode your net worth. And I know that that sounds pretty crazy on the surface, but if you watch this video until the very end, I think some minds will be blown. I think some minds will be open. And I think this will be a video that you can send to your spouse or to your partner or whoever and be like, dude, this is what we got to try. But before we get into it, let me turn on the AC because honestly, I did that intro way more times than I care to admit. So today's video is actually going to be talking about a concept called house hacking. And, you know, if you're familiar with the concept, I'm going to uncover some new ways of thinking about house hacking. But if you don't know what house hacking is, it's basically the philosophy of, well, more the concept. I mean, you could call it a philosophy, Margaret, if you'd like. But it's basically the concept of renting out a room or a space or an area in your home to a tenant to help subsidize your mortgage. So if you have a $1,000 mortgage and you rent out a room for $200, that $200 would now make your mortgage effectively $800 every single month. That's the general premise of a house hack. And it's actually how I got started. And the reason I wanted to make this video is because so many people get in their head about getting started in the world of real estate. They come to me and they say, Rob, I want to get into real estate. I want to try it, but I don't know what to do. I bought my primary residence and I don't have enough money to buy a rental. Should I sell my primary and just go buy a rental? And I come across this hurdle, I feel like almost every single week when someone is asking me for advice, when the answer is just so simple and it's right in front of you. If you own a home, you can actually house hack. And I actually think it is the greatest way to get into real estate because it is the fastest form of building cash flow. I want to talk about myself for a little bit, not really at any kind of brag, but more so to just talk about where I'm at in my journey. I've 40 doors or so. It's always expanding, but roughly there. A multi-million-dollar net worth in my portfolio. That, you know, I didn't do that alone. I had partners. I scaled within 5, 6 years, 7 years. So I've had a pretty good trajectory, I would say. And I would say that for where I am in my portfolio, I genuinely do, going back to that spicy intro clip, I attribute everything to that because I house hacked. And house hacking is such a powerful tool because if you think about it, it really is the fastest way to build cash flow in real estate that's relatively low cost. When I got started in the world of real estate, I hadn't even really intended on being a real estate investor, but I bought a house in Kansas City. It cost me $159,000 to purchase. I had put 3.5% down, and I got into this home where my mortgage was $1,100, and I had a friend that was moving up to Kansas City, and I was like, well, why don't you come live with us? And you can rent a really good, I'll give you a good rate. I'll rent a room out to you for $400, all bills paid. And so he was like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. So he moved up, and I remember getting a $400 Venmo from him that first month and being like, whoa, something crazy just happened. My $1,100 mortgage just turned into a $700 mortgage. That was life-changing. It really was. At that time, $80,000 in student loan debt, credit card debt, all that good stuff. So that extra $400 truly was life-changing for me at that time. And I remember just thinking like, wow, that's so nuts that I already own the home. That room is going to be empty. Why the heck not just rent all of them out, right? But I had a wife, and so she wasn't going to be like, hey, yeah, let's rent out all the rooms. I think she was comfortable with having just one roommate, but that was fine because that was all the difference that it made. And I think it's really an important thing to enter the world of real estate with an open mind with, because if you're open to house hacking, you're building a lot of discipline, you're building a lot of character. And what I mean by this is the character you're building is what you're conquering by having a house hack is you're conquering the idea of instant gratification. It is really, it breaks your comfort level. It puts you out of your comfort zone to have a roommate, to have a stranger possibly in your house, in your private space, especially if you have a wife, especially if you have kids or, you know, whatever it is, right? It's not really that easy to let people live with you in general, much less a stranger. But what it does is it helps you save and subsidize your mortgage to the point where if you could completely subsidize your mortgage, that really starts to explode your net worth in the world of, you know, you're able to now stack yearly cash in a way, you're able to save so much more than you ever could. And I'll give you an example of this. I'll break down some of the math that's involved with house hacking. But, you know, if you think about the fact that a lot of mortgages, let's say $2,000, if you could subsidize that $2,000 every single month by having a roommate or having different roommates at your property, well, what you're really doing is you're stopping yourself from having to come out of pocket $2,000, right? But you're also, you know, you're saving that $2,000, you're banking it. And over the course of a year, you're banking $24,000. Think about how hard it is to save $24,000, even if you weren't house hacking. If you were just like, hey, I want to save $24,000. Well, saving $2,000 a month is actually pretty insane, especially when you consider the fact that most salaries are probably in that $50,000 range all the way up to, let's say, $100,000, 50 to 100K. Saving up $2,000, extremely difficult. And so if you can do that through a house hack, it really starts to kind of unlock possibilities of things that you never really thought were possible. For me, that extra $400 that I made when I was house hacking was our eating out money. We would go out to a restaurant, I would go to Chipotle. You know, I talk about this jokingly. Everyone knows I love Chipotle, but in my broker days, I would go to Chipotle and I would literally just order a bowl of rice because it was 67 cents. And I remember getting that paycheck, you know, or that rent on Venmo and thinking like, holy moly, I can afford like meat on my Chipotle, which is a weird thing to get excited about. But it's true. It's how I thought. I was like, oh my gosh, we can go out to eat. We can have dinner. I can actually do things with my wife that we ordinarily couldn't afford. And then we moved to Los Angeles from Kansas City, and we bought a house in Los Angeles eventually. That was $624K. Talk about this all the time. And my mortgage on that was $4,400. And I had started Airbnb at this point, so I was making some money there, but I couldn't afford this $4,400 payment. But here's what ended up happening. I had a little 279 square foot studio apartment under this house, and I decided to rent it on Airbnb. And this is a form of house hacking. It's not a long-term tenant, but you know, I was subsidizing my mortgage by renting out a portion of my house, and I was making $2,000 to $3,000 in gross revenue, which would cancel out 50 to 75% of my mortgage. It was pretty huge at that time. And then I had a friend that was moving to LA, and I was like, hey, bro, if you live with us, you can rent the guest bedroom, and I'll do $800 every single month, all bills paid. And so the $800 plus, we'll call it the $2,500 that I was making from the Airbnb on average downstairs came out to, what is 2,500 plus 800? $3,400. 2,500, $3,300. I got this. Math is hard. $3,300. $3,300 out of $4,400 is pretty near 75% of my mortgage. And I wasn't just subsidizing my mortgage, but now I got to keep $3,300 a month in my pockets. So let's just multiply 3,300 times 12. It's $39,600. It's actually pretty nuts. Like, it would be really hard for me to save $40,000 any other way. But what I did is I found a house and I said, instead of saying I can't afford it, I would say, how can I afford it? And the way I could afford it was by, you know, sacrificing my comfort and having roommates and Airbnb guests in and out of my property. And then eventually, you probably know the story from here, but I went out and I built a tiny house in my backyard. And that tiny house went on to make several $1,000s on Airbnb as well, which is another form of house hacking. And I just stacked that income with roommate income, with studio income. And now all of a sudden, $4,400 was being wiped away from my monthly spend, and $4,400 times 12 is $52,800. And now I was living mortgage free. And I think the moment that you become mortgage free or rent free is when you start your second financial life. Gosh, I wish that we could splice that and put that in the intro, but this will just be for the real ones. But I genuinely believe that the moment you're rent-free, mortgage-free, your second life begins, because now you don't have any financial obligations. I mean, obviously you have the debt of the house, but you don't actually have that monthly financial obligation because it's being paid for by other people. And now I could take that $52,800 and reinvest it or keep it if I didn't want to be disciplined, whatever it is. For me, obviously I went on to build another tiny house in Joshua Tree, and I scaled up my whole portfolio and all that good stuff. But I have become a millionaire in net worth, which doesn't really mean all that much in my opinion at where I am in my life. But it's true. Like if I were to sell everything that I have, I would have, a couple $1,000,000 or a few $1,000,000. I don't know, a decent amount to my name. And I mean, obviously it would be very stressful to do that. I'd have to talk to a lot of realtors. It would go against everything that I actually believe. But I'm just saying, if I did, I would have a few $1,000,000 or whatever's after 3, 4 or 5. It doesn't matter. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Golly, I wish I wouldn't even have gone down this rabbit hole. It doesn't matter. The point of it is that there are 7 figures in net worth in my name because I first house hacked that first house that I bought in Kansas City for $159,000. I then sold it, and then I bought a house in in Los Angeles. And now that house, I bought it for $624,000. It's worth, I don't know, 1.2, somewhere in there. So I have about $500,000-$600,000 of equity in that house. And then it allowed me to build my tiny house and, get up to 40 doors and scale up with partnerships and other people's money and all that kind of stuff. And it's all because I delayed the concept of instant gratification for many years, for many, many, many years. I mean, I've lived with roommates from 2013 to basically 2022, 2021, 2022. So 7-8 years. So I think I can sit here and tell you I am the poster child for house hacking. I really think so. I think I put in my dues, and I'm coming from a place of like, I genuinely want this for everybody because it changed my life, and it's what allowed me to explode my real estate career, truly. And I think that's the biggest benefit. Like, you're saving money, you're learning discipline, you're squashing instant gratification. And that has really led to my philosophy now, where because I've kind of pushed instant gratification aside, I've done away with that concept. Now I'm fine, like really not taking a paycheck from real estate. I've always been like that. I've been very diligent about taking all my rental income, stacking it up, and reinvesting it back into more properties or back into my portfolio. And it all started with house hacking, because there were so many times where I would get that check, right? That Airbnb guest that paid me $1,000 or whatever. And there was times where I was like, well, I could just spend this $1,000 and for once just pay $1,000 out of my own pocket to live here. Why not? But I didn't do that for so many years. I mean, occasionally I did here and there, right? Because we do need to reward ourselves. But overall, I was so good about it that now I really look at real estate as this labor of love, this side hustle that builds my wealth. And I will retire with a ton of equity and a good net worth because I was able to just push aside the idea of instant gratification. Now, the downsides, I just painted a beautiful picture of house hacking, but there's some downsides. There's some downsides all the time with any form of real estate. There's no such thing as a safe real estate investment. Everything carries its own risk, and keep that in mind as you consider this and as you pitch this to your wife or your husband and you say, look, watch this video that Rob Built made. I'm telling you, Rob said it, we have to do it now. There's some risks, so make sure to end the video here if you don't want them to hear about this. But I think the risk is basically, maybe you don't want to be around new people. Maybe you don't want to have to deal with kind of gross or messy people, and that could totally happen. You might have a roommate that, maybe they're not dirty, but they're messy. Or maybe they're not messy, but they're dirty. Maybe they just don't clean up after themselves. Maybe they leave the toilet seat open. Maybe they drink milk out of the carton and it annoys you and it grinds your gears. If you're the kind of person that in general gets annoyed by roommates, well, guess what? Like, that's what you're dealing with in the world of house hacking. And so there's a few ways that you can kind of mitigate that specific risk. You could do long-term tenants in your house hack. And this is basically where if you have a room, let's say you have a house that's like 3 bedrooms, you could live in one and you could rent the other 2 to people for 12 months at a time. Or you can do what I call supercharged house hacking, and you can just rent those rooms to people on Airbnb. And if you do that, you know, they might be messy, but they'd only be messy for like 3 or 4 days, and then they're out of there and you have a new tenant. Now, with all that said, going the Airbnb route, you'll make more money doing that. And the benefits of that is you'll make more money and you'll have less, you can basically block out when people can stay at your place. You have full control of when people are living at your house, and you can make a pretty similar income to a long-term tenant as well. But there's more maintenance. It's not passive at all. And I even think, yeah, a long-term tenant house hack, you know, if you're renting to someone for 12 months at a time in your room, also not passive. I mean, yeah, there's the frustration and all the things that I just talked about. They might be kind of whiny. They might want you to fix stuff more than you would if you just live there by yourself. So keep in mind, house hacking isn't really all that passive, but it is easier because you live on site, and so you can kind of address things super quickly. Whereas if I have a property in, let's say, North Carolina and something breaks, you know, I have to move mountains a little bit to address that type of stuff. Whereas when it's in your house, very easy for you to kind of fix and acknowledge on your own. So you can go the long-term route, you can go the short-term route. If you really wanted to be kind of safe with everything, I think one of the ways you could do it is if you had 2 different rooms, you could long-term rent one for 12 months at a time. And then if you wanted the extra cash or anytime you needed money, you could rent that other room. And that other room could just be like a flex space. And whenever you need an extra $200 or $300, you rent that out. But the nice thing about house hacking and kind of bringing in Airbnb into this is not only can you rent that extra room in this scenario, but if you ever want to go on vacation, you can rent out your room too. And you can basically pay for your vacation through short-term rentals, which is obviously where I fall. Funny enough, I never really got to experience this. When I did house hacking in its truest form, where I was renting to someone for 12 months at a time, Airbnb wasn't really like a thing. I mean, it existed, but I didn't know enough about it to try it. I wish I would have, though. I would have made more money and I would have been way more excited. And there's definitely a friendlier element to that. But it's not for everybody. And I think it's a people business. It's a hospitality thing. And if you're not a hospitable person, you're going to hate house hacking. Now, the other way that you can do this, if you're that person, because there's a solution out there for pretty much everything, would be house hacking in a different capacity. So the way I've been explaining it is the assumption that you buy a house, you have rooms in that house, and you rent out those rooms and you're under one roof. But the other way you can actually house hack is actually a pretty amazing concept too. And that would be if you buy like a duplex, which is basically 2 homes on one lot, detached or attached, or a triplex or a fourplex, doesn't really matter, but you know, basically separate dwelling areas on your property. And you could actually rent those different properties and not really have to interact with those tenants all that much. I know plenty of people who have a duplex. They live on one side, and then on the other side, they Airbnb it out. And that Airbnb not only pays their mortgage, but they actually make money from doing that. And then there are people that I know that have triplexes and fourplexes, same thing. They might live in one, long-term rent the other, and Airbnb the other 2. And it's a really, really great way because once you start getting into that world of like duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes, that's when you go from just house hacking and subsidizing your mortgage to actually making thousands of dollars every single month. And that's where it really starts to compound because, as I mentioned, you start your second life when you subsidize your mortgage. But you start your third financial life when you subsidize your mortgage and then make thousands of dollars on top of that, because then at that point, that's, I think, when you start getting a lot closer to financial freedom. For me, my second life was paying off my mortgage, breaking even there. My third life started when I started doing Airbnb and I was making $1,000 a month. And that $1,000 was paying off my student loans because at that point I was really like, wow, I have no financial obligations now. Like I can actually save money and buy more real estate. So I think if you're in the kind of person that doesn't really like if you're not a hostile person, if you don't like to meet people, if you don't want to live under the same roof, all totally understandable. But consider like a duplex, a triplex, and a quadplex or a fourplex. That's a really amazing way to start. And you can choose your strategy, whether it's short-term rentals or long-term rentals, and you have that control and you actually have the ability to make money doing that. I think it is the catalyst for getting started in the world of real estate and really getting ahead in life. And so I talk about this because I have people that often come up to me and they say, I don't know where to get started. I don't know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, all right, well, do you have a house now? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, there you go. if you're really scared of real estate, if you're scared of all the risk, if you don't think it's going to work out, the easiest thing you can do is start a house hack and just test the waters, dip your toes in the water and see if you like the idea of real estate and being a landlord, because being a house hack landlord is the easiest version of it and the lowest risk, in my opinion. One risk that I also didn't talk about that's a pretty big one would be squatters. That's always a possibility. I don't hear about it as much with house hackers, but it's definitely true. You still want to have a lease. You still want to do all that good stuff. But keep in mind, squatting is definitely a real risk that you might face if you're taking in randos. So keep that in mind. No real estate investment is like, it's always funny when I talk about midterm rentals, how people are like, but the squatters, Rob, what do I do if they squat? And I'm like, it's the same risk as if you had a long-term tenant. They could also squat. And it's the same risk if you had a short-term tenant. They could also squat. So a house hack isn't really all that different. I'm not saying it's not a risk. I'm just saying like it's the same level of risk as any other form of real estate, in my opinion. But you know what opinions are like. You know what I mean? Okay, so now I sort of want to break down kind of some of the interesting math with house hacking that David Green, who's a partner of mine on one of my properties and the co-host of the Bigger Pockets podcast. Or sorry, I'm the co-host. He's the host. But he's been a great mentor to me, and he just said something to me that really clicked in a way that just got me to just think like, holy crap, like house hacking is such a gold mine, and I've never seen it framed this way. So I'm going to try to walk you through this. This is a one-take video. Hopefully it doesn't get too convoluted, but he basically said, if you want to make $2,000 a month in a typical investment, all right? If you want to make $2,000 a month, AKA $24,000 a year, all right? So $2,000 a month, which comes out to $24,000 a year. If you wanted to make that, and let's say that you're going to make a 10% return on your money, how much money would you need to invest to make $2,000 a month? And the answer very quickly here is $240,000. If you put that in stocks or crypto or whatever, you would need to put $240,000 into a traditional investment, make a 10% return in order to make $2,000 a month or $24,000 a year. Now, 10% isn't really all that easy. I mean, it's possible and a lot of people do it, but a more realistic number is 6%. That is a really good, I think most people can make a 6% return if they really tried. And so with that math, if you wanted to make $24,000 a year, right? Or $2,000 a month at a 6% return, like you're making 6% on your money, then you'd actually have to invest $400,000. So if you invested $400,000 into some typical fund, ROI, whatever, daddy's my filler word. I know, weird. You're learning things about me in these one-take wonders. But if you were to just put that in crypto, stocks, whatever, $400K, and you made a 6% return on that $400,000, then you would make $24,000 a year or $2,000 a month, which is crazy because imagine how long it would take you, whether it's the 10% or the 6%, to save up $240,000 or $400,000 to get invested in the first place. And when you think about it that way, it's actually kind of mind-blowing because if you buy like the actual leverage that comes along with real estate is kind of crazy because let's just say that you wanted to buy a house that, had a $2,000 mortgage and cost around $240,000. $240,000, you wouldn't have to buy that house cash. You can use what's called leverage, right? Where you're using the bank and they're actually loaning the majority of that. And because you would be living in it and it would be your primary residence, you would only have to put down 3.5%. 3.5% of $240,000 is $8,400. That would be your down payment. Now you'd have some points and closing costs, all that stuff, but for simple math, $8,400. That's how much money you would need to put down at a 3.5% down payment with like an FHA loan on a $240,000 house so that you could then have like roughly, I mean, I don't know the math exactly, but we'll call it a $2,400 mortgage, but $2,000 mortgage that you could then rent to different roommates and have them completely cancel out that mortgage. And that's way easier. Anyone can save $8,400. Anybody. I'm not saying it's easy, but you could work 2 jobs, you could work 3 jobs, you could do side hustles, whatever it is, but anybody could save $8,400. Not anyone can save $240 to $400K, right? And so when you start thinking about the different levers of real estate and the leverage that you can get with banks, like you can go so far with a house hack because you can put 3.5% down, have other people pay your mortgage down, and now you're subsidizing it. And then after, I think it's either 6 months or 12, I think it's 12 months, you can then do that again and get another FHA loan. And again, save up $8,400, get into that house, turn the original home into a long-term rental, or you could rent it by the room, doesn't matter. You can get into another house hack. And then a year later, into another house hack. Into a year later, another house hack. And if you did this consistently for 5 years, you could have 5 properties that appreciate in value, give you the tax benefits, and you could actually get into real estate at a much quicker rate if you think about it. Because to buy 5 houses at $8,400 as a down payment, I mean, that's so much easier than going out and buying a rental property and putting 20% down on a property and then having to save 20% down, which on $240,000 would be $48,000. You would have to save up $48,000 every time you wanted to buy another $240,000 house. Whereas if you were willing to sacrifice comfort for just a little bit and have roommates for 7-8 years like I did, you could have 5 houses for a grand total of like 50 grand. And that, my friends, is the power of not only house hacking, but real estate. And if you did that for 5-10 years, whatever it may be, then I'll allow you to stop house hacking. You can graduate. But by the time you retire and you're 65, those 5 houses will have appreciated so much, they probably double in value. And you probably would retire, like you could, it's very realistic to retire a millionaire just through house hacking, which now that I think about it, maybe I should call this video like how having roommates can make you a millionaire. We'll see. Whatever tests better in the YouTube algorithm. But that's my story today. I made a video a couple weeks ago that's called These Are the 4 Ways That You Can Get Filthy Wealthy in Real Estate. And it basically talks you through the 4 main components of a real estate investment and how they make you filthy wealthy, from tax benefits to cash flow to debt pay down. It's a really great video, and it's one that honestly underrated. I thought it was really good when I made it. So if you want to watch it, check it out right here. It gives you a really good foundation in real estate, and I think it might open your mind a bit too. So thanks for watching. If you like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. It does help me appear in other feeds. And if this went viral, it could change my life, and you could be a part of that. So thank you so much. Catch you on the next episode of Raw Built.